Just a heads up, this video will contain some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, go watch the movie and then come back to this video. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein has been out just a couple of days now, and I took the chance to watch through this movie a couple of times, and there's so much to unpack here, so I'm just gonna jump right in. It opens with this scene of explorers who get stuck in the ice, and then they look down in the distance at night and they see this fire, and they realize there's a man over there and it's Victor Frankenstein, and they go and save him, only to find out he's being chased by this monster who then attacks everyone on the ship. I mean, the cinematics of this thing just look crazy. I've heard a lot of people say that it kind of looks like a video game, almost like the way they did some of the transitions or some of the panning a little bit. I guess that can be the case, but to me, it looked fantastic. This thing did roll out in theaters, but not many. I think it was like 600 theaters across the country. It should have gotten a much bigger rollout because this is like what Hollywood is about right here. This to me was a masterpiece and the best version of Frankenstein I've ever seen. And I'm pretty sure I've seen every version of Frankenstein up until this point. And my favorite was always the Robert De Niro version. And I know that one could get a little weird at times, but it is still my favorite version of Frankenstein up until I saw Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. And then aside from the cinematics, one of the things I really loved about this was the use of colors in this movie. Like, it's a lot of dark gothic tone, the way, it kind of speaks to the era of when the film takes place. But one of the more noticeable things about the colors is the use of color red. The only time you see anyone wear red in this film is with two people, and that is Victor's mother and Victor himself. And there's a huge reason for that, right? There's a connection of life and death there, right? There's this love that he had for his mother and the life that, she represented. And then the night she dies, she leaves this bloody handprint across his face. And that represents the death part of it too. So throughout the movie, from that point forward, he's always wearing something red. And one of the more noticeable things are the red gloves. He always has them on, whether he's doing surgery or he's outdoors looking for the bodies to piece together. He always has these gloves on until the moment that he realizes that the monster's awakened. And I think the reason for that is to say that, he was kind of playing God and trying to pretend he was innocent, keeping his hands clean. But the moment that monster stood up over him, he realized that now, the gloves have to come off. Like, there's going to be blood on his hands now. I think I'll go much deeper into that in my next video, which would be 10 things you missed in this movie. Now, one of the crazier departures from the other films is this time you have Mia Goth playing two different roles. She's playing Victor's mother, and then she's also playing the fiance of his brother, which is Victor's love interest at the same time. And I think that really speaks to his Oedipus complex in a way, right? Everything was about his mother, and then now he falls in love with this woman that looks like her, that kind of represents her. So I think there might have been a little bit of an Oedipus complex in there. I think at the same time, it represented something that he couldn't have, both sexually and maternally. So it was definitely a much deeper meaning there. Now, another thing that I really, really liked about this movie was the look of Frankenstein. Like, you're not getting the typical square-headed bolts in the neck like you see above my shoulder here. Like, we're not getting that Frankenstein. We're getting something that makes a lot more sense. He's not walking around grunting, and this is actually the creation of a real human being who has a huge life lesson to learn. I think in this movie, Guillermo del Toro found a really interesting way to tell that original story from the novelization, because a lot of times the movies have really gotten away from the book. This time, of course, there are some very key differences, some really big departures from the book, but at the same time, a lot of it really is true to that first novelization, the original Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I think the biggest part of that is the telling of Victor's story in playing God, the lesson that he had to learn. Del Toro really found the best way to tell that version of the story in this film. Victor created this life. He had such an obsession with death because of his mother, because of, the way his mother left the world and the impact that had on him. And then he thought that one day he'd be able to play God. He'd be able to cure death. By doing so, he created this life And then he abandons it, when he gets so frustrated because this monster can only say one word, and it's the first word he ever learned, Victor. This monster can only say his name, and it's frustrating Victor Frankenstein. He's infuriated at one point by this, to the point where he starts to actually act a lot like his abusive father. The same things he hated about his father, he's now doing to the monster. And I think in one of the biggest departures from the 1931 film, and in most other versions of the film as well, is the way that the laboratory burns down. He has the Frankenstein castle, or whatever you want to call it, is sitting on top of this hill. And if you've read the book or seen the 1931 film or any other adaptation of this movie, it's the townspeople who chase down the monster and burn the place down. In this case, it's Victor trying to kill his own monster, and he burns the place down with the monster trapped in the basement. But then we get to see a different side of Victor. Just for a brief second, we see a little bit of humanity, because he hears the monster calling out to him, screaming for help. And he actually turns around and goes back and tries to save his monster, but then an explosion kind of knocks him back out of the building, rips off his leg. So there's definitely some really big differences in this version of the film. And like I said, it was a much better way to tell this story. Another big change that you see in this version of the film that you don't see in other versions of the film is Elizabeth, in a way, kind of becoming very infatuated with the creature, to the point that it almost feels like she's in love with the creature. And I'm not sure if I'm just reading that wrong, or she actually is falling in love with this creature, because that makes it a little bit weird. But that is definitely one of the bigger departures, and the creature is obviously in love with her. It's the second word he ever learned was to say Elizabeth. So I'll keep this video short and to the point. In my next video, I'll be going over 10 things that you might have missed in this movie. So make sure to hit the like button on this video and hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get the notification when I post that next video.